Hi all, hope you're staying safe and well. Today we're going to be moving on to look at the actual text of Romeo and Juliet itself. We've done some work on the context, the background, the characters. Now we're going to actually get into the text. Romeo and Juliet is slightly unusual for a Shakespeare play in that it starts with a prologue, which is a character, the chorus, who comes onto the stage and gives a brief speech before any of the action of the play actually kicks off. So we need to consider why this is important, why this is significant, and the language of the prologue is very, very useful for illuminating our understanding of the key themes and ideas. So I hope this is really, really useful, and it'll get our teeth into some of the Shakespearean language, ready to start looking at the play proper when the action starts in Act 1, Scene 1. Okay, so the first thing to do is to listen to the language of the prologue. It is 14 lines long, which is in a sonnet form. So here we go. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge breaks to a new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured, piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, the which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. Okay, the first thing we really want to consider with looking at the prologue is its structure and its form. It's almost as if it is a poem in itself at the start of the play to engage the audience, and looking at that form is really, really significant. So the fact that it is 14 lines long is important because this gives it the sonnet form. And if we look at the rhyme scheme, it's an A B C D C D E F G G rhyme scheme, which sounds unusual, but if we look, we have dignity rhyming with mutiny, we have scene rhyming with unclean, we have foes and overthrows, life and strife, love and remove, which is quite a half rhyme, rage and stage, and then finally attend and mend. Now the perfection of this rhyme scheme could indicate the clarity that the prologue has. The prologue tells the audience what is going to happen in the play. It's almost like an omniscient narrator, someone who understands and knows everything before it happens. So the fact that it's perfection in the rhyme scheme could indicate that. We also have the fact that it is a sonnet form, which is typically used as romantic address and romantic love. So we can look at these forms and say, well, actually the fact that Shakespeare chooses to open with a sonnet could indicate this is a story of romance. However, if we look at the language of the prologue, which we're going to break down in the next section, then we start to see this is an unusual form because it's not necessarily just about love. There's a lot about fate and a lot about death here. So the fact that it's a sonnet form could indicate potentially that it's a story about love, but the fact that the language of it is different could indicate it's telling us a little bit more about that. The perfection of the sonnet form could tell us, and the fact that it's got the perfect rhyme scheme could indicate that this is someone who has clarity and a greater understanding than a lot of the characters within the play. Okay, the first purpose of the prologue is to give a setting and a background for the play. So we have the two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. What this tells us is that there are two households, two families who are both alike in dignity. They are both of a similar status. They are both of a similar authority and power within this city. Then it has in fair Verona where we lay our scene. So therefore we know that this action is now taking place in Italy. It is taking place in the city of Verona. So the first two lines tell us that we have two families, both very powerful, both very strong, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to a new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Now what we have here is that there is an ancient grudge. There is some sort of dispute between these two families that is ancient. It has been going on for a long, long time. and this has led to a new mutiny. There is now violence on the streets because of this. So it's quite a nice line to remember: the ancient grudge and the new mutiny. And civil blood is making civil hands unclean. Blood has been shed in this dispute, and it is a very violent and dangerous conflict between these two families. So within those first 4 lines, what we have is that we know that it's about 2 families who are both very powerful and very strong in Verona, in Italy. There's an ancient grudge, there's an ancient sort of dispute between the 2 families, and it is now leading to blood on the streets, and it is making the families blood on their hands because of the violence between the 2 families. Okay, the next few lines of the prologue get into Romeo and Juliet's story. We have, from forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventures, piteous overthrows, do with their death bury their parents' strife, the fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove. Now, what we're seeing here is actually the prologue is telling us Romeo and Juliet's story. We hear that they are a pair of star-crossed lovers. This means that they are bound by fate, that stars have aligned to tell their story, both for good and for bad. And the fact that it says that they take their life. Now, it's unusual. It's an unusual form in the fact that the sonnet is telling us, this prologue is telling us at the start, that Romeo and Juliet will die in this play. The audience are being told the very, very end of the play, right at the very, very start, and that's an unusual strategy from Shakespeare, if you like. It's an unusual way of going about things. We also have the fact that it is a misadventure, that this is something that is going to end badly, that this is something that is going against society's traditions and society's values. So therefore, it ends badly. We hear that they take their life, so we know that this is a play that's going to be about the death of these young people by their own hands. It's not that they are killed by someone else. It is they take their own lives. We also have the fact that it was the only thing that could bury their parents' strife, the only thing that could end the fighting and the drama between the 2 families, the Montagues and the Capulets, is the death of their 2 children, and the continuance of their parents' rage. So quite a bold starting point for Shakespeare here. The fact that the prologue is telling us that these 2 characters that we're going to be introduced to are going to die by the end of the play, and the story of these 2 star-crossed lovers, these 2 lovers who are bound by fate and doomed to die. Okay, the final 2 lines of the prologue impart the audience to pay attention, to listen to what is going to be told on stage. The idea of the first 12 lines is telling us the story, and then it says, with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. So what we have is the final 2 lines telling the audience, if you listen to this, we will tell you this story. Now, we already spoke about the fact that it's, by using the prologue, we are telling the story, we're telling the audience what the ending is going to be already. Now, we could argue that Shakespeare's using this to grab the attention of their audience. We talked in the previous videos about the themes and ideas that are going to really resonate with his audience. Themes such as fate, themes such as love, and themes such as death. And within the prologue, we have all of these things being mentioned already. We have the idea of the star-crossed lovers, we have the fate, we have the ancient grudge and new mutiny, civil blood, so we have the themes of violence, and we have the idea of the star-crossed lovers, so therefore we have the theme of romance. So the prologue is there to really engage the audience, to get them hooked into the story, and get them anticipating and ready for the narrative that is to appear on stage. Okay, probably the most important quotations to remember, if you can, from the prologue are to do with this idea of fate and destiny. Ideally, the phrase we want remembering is the idea of star-crossed lovers. Now, what this is telling us is that these two lovers, Romeo and Juliet, have been bound by the stars. Their fate has already been written, and the star crossed indicates that there is some sort of conflict between the two of them. In this case, it's between the two families. This is a really, really useful quote to remember. If you get any sort of question about fate or about how the lovers are destined to, or doomed right from the very start, the prologue tells us that they are star-crossed. It also uses the phrase death-marked love, the fact that this love is already doomed to die from the very, very first meeting. It's been marked by death, and we could talk about the personification of fate and death as actual entities that are in conflict with Romeo and Juliet. So when we're considering the prologue, remember this idea of fate and destiny. These two characters are completely doomed from the start, and we know this right from the very, very start of the play, and the audience are waiting for this to happen. They're waiting for things to start to go wrong. Okay, and another key aspect to be able to remember is the idea of love and death. These star-crossed lovers take their life. So we have this understanding straight away about the fact that these two lovers are going to die. They are doomed to die. That we have the ancient grudge and new mutiny, civil blood and civil hands unclean. There's lots and lots of language to do with death and to do with suffering and to do with violence within the prologue, which is contrasted with the love of Romeo and Juliet, which is the star-crossed lovers. So when analysing the prologue, have a look at that language of violence and the language of love, and look at how they contrast and juxtapose each other. Again, these short, snappy quotations from the prologue are very, very useful to illuminate any essay that you are doing, because remember, we have to refer to the wider text. If you get an extract from later on in the play, and then you can refer back to the prologue and how the themes and ideas link together, that's a really, really useful strategy. Okay, for you to do today, there are two things I'd like you to have a look at. The first of which is to get yourself a copy of the prologue and to annotate it and have a look at the language that's been used and have a look at the key ideas that we've been exploring here. So in particular, have a look at the language of fate, have a look at the language of death, have a look at the language of love and the idea of premonition and what is going to be happening in the play. The second thing I would like you to do is to rewrite the prologue and write it in a modern English translation. So there are versions of this online which will be able to help you with this. Things like No Fear Shakespeare is quite a good website to have a look at, which will help give you some ideas in there. But what I'd like from you is 14 lines translated, so you have a modern English translation, so you are well aware of what the ideas are and the big themes are in the prologue before we move on to have a look at the text in the next couple of days. Okay, for today's film recommendation, I'm going for one that is completely out of season, with the blazing sunshine outside. It's a Christmas film, which is not necessarily all to do with Christmas. It's one of my childhood favourites, and it is Home Alone. It's just a fantastic film. It's just pure silly nonsense for an hour and a half, and it's fantastic. It's really, really funny. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. Next time we're going to have a look at Act 1, Scene 1 and have a look at the opening sequence of the play. Until then, stay safe.